Welcome back to Foregenix Fireside Chats. The PCI P2PE program plays a critical role in securing payments and helping businesses dramatically reduce their PCI scope. But how exactly is this accomplished, and how can your business take advantage of it now and in the future? I'm your host, Tal Minks, and joining us we have Paolo Basilio, who will be answering this question and more. Paolo is the Managing Principal and Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Foregenix. Formerly the head of the Foregenix P2PE practice, Paolo has been helping customers list their P2PE products for the last 11 years and is one of the most experienced P2PE practitioners in the industry. Paolo, we're glad you could be here with us today.
Thanks, Tal. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you today.
I'd like to start from a high-level perspective, and then we can drill down into more of the detail as we go along. So firstly, what is PCI P2PE? And what is the objective of the P2PE program in the payments industry?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Tal. It's pretty simple. P2PE is a set of requirements that talks about how you sufficiently encrypt data from point A to point B. And typically in the P2PE world, or in the PCI world, of course, this is applied from the point of sale device until the backend HSM or payment service provider systems. And really, these standards are based on international best practices. They're based on international standards like ISO, ANSI, and NIST. And basically, they provide the foundation of the cryptographic key management processes, device management processes, and everything around cryptography that ultimately secures data from point A to point B. Now, the PCI Council created this standard in order to give scope reductions for the users of these solutions. So typically, these are applied to merchants that have face-to-face acceptance of cardholder transactions. So when you go to the store and you tap your card at a card machine, the data is then read into that card machine, encrypted to a sufficient level, sent through to the back-end acquiring systems, making sure that whilst your data is moving across the store network of the merchant that you're shopping at, that data is sufficiently encrypted that if that store network was breached by an attacker, a hacker or someone, or the data was somehow intercepted by someone on that network, the data wouldn't be useful to them because it would be sufficiently encrypted with a key that is not possessed by the merchant. So the key thing there is to provide the scope reduction to the merchants that use these solutions, and the solution is taken care of by the solution provider. So this is basically the intent of the point-to-point encryption standard.
Got it. Thank you so much for that broad overview, and that gives us a clear picture of the purpose of P2PE. Let's get a bit more practical now. What are the constituent parts or components that make up a P2PE solution?
That's a good question, Tal. So ultimately, P2PE solutions are made up of cryptographic devices, cryptographic algorithms, and cryptographic keys. Now, there's a number of entities involved in managing these three things. And ultimately, you have the encryption management service provider entities. These are entities that are involved in the POI device lifecycle, signing of applications, and deployment of configuration and applications onto the devices, as well as those POI device lifecycles. And by POI device, I'm talking specifically here about the card machines. Then you have the P2PE application vendors. These are entities that develop applications that will handle the payment processes on the terminal. So these applications are intended for terminals, and they basically process the payments. Then you have the decryption management service providers. These are typically those entities on the back end, the acquirers, entities that manage the HSMs, and those will be the entities that manage the decryption of the data once it's encrypted at the card machine, POI terminal. And then, of course, you have the key management entities. Now, these are things like key injection facilities, certificate authorities, and other entities that are involved in key management processes, either injecting keys into terminals or just doing general key management. These are the different entities that are involved within the P2PE process They function as service providers or component providers, and the solution provider is responsible for making sure that all these entities are compliant, whether they are internal entities that the solution provider controls or external service providers.
Well, thank you so much for making sense of all those different moving parts and giving us a nice cohesive picture. Now I'd like to shift into some of the challenges. From your perspective, what are the main challenges facing P2PE solution and component providers today?
Well, Tal, I think the most difficult challenge for component providers and solution providers is managing dependencies. So there are so many dependencies within P2P solutions and components on PTS listings, on application listings, on various other listings. And a huge challenge for these entities is making sure that the entities that are responsible for those listings, usually a third party, maintain compliance and continue to renew their certifications and compliance with those particular products. And so we shouldn't neglect, or organizations shouldn't neglect, the management of their P2P solution or their P2P component, because they need to continuously monitor those third parties and ensure that those components which the solutions rely on, whether it's a service provider, whether it's an application, whether it's a PTS device, to ensure that those entities continue to maintain compliance with the prerequisite standards that P2PE has a dependency on.
Well, thank you for that look into the different challenges. Looking ahead, though, what does the future hold for the PCI P2PE program and standards?
Well, in terms of P2PE, P2PE is a way to make cardholder data less valuable while it transits different networks, the network providers, the merchant environment, whoever else within the chain between one point and another. And this is becoming really the primary way to secure cardholder data in the industry. And many of the card schemes and the different acquiring entities out there are understanding this now. And so P2PE is going to be something which is adopted more broadly within the payments industry, not only in the face-to-face encryption space, but anywhere where cardholder data is accepted to the point where authorization or the data needs to be used in some way. Those channels are all going to start to apply, if they haven't started applying them already, encrypted channels and encryption mechanisms to secure the data whilst in transit between those channels. And I think what this means for P2PE is going to become more critical, and probably variations of P2PE are going to start showing up where P2PE can be used in different use cases. So, for example, at the moment, the only use case for P2PE is encryption within a PCI PTS certified terminal and decryption within a PCI PTS certified HSM. But as you know, there are other types of acceptance mechanisms that are starting to pop up now. So, for example, mobile acceptance on your phone, or accepting card transactions through other channels. And of course, those channels are going to require that data to be secured in a similar fashion. So I think in terms of payment processing, encryption of data using the fundamental principles of P2PE is going to become the norm going into the future. And some form or some derivative of P2PE is going to be used across various different acceptance channels.
I think we've covered a good deal of information and left our viewers with some great advice to inform their compliance decisions moving forwards. As we come to a close, I'd like to ask, what's one key takeaway that you would like to leave with our audience today?
Yeah, so one key takeaway, I think, is that P2PE solutions are very complex, and there are typically many moving parts within a P2PE solution. And solution providers should not neglect the fact that the P2PE solution needs to be managed. There needs to be responsibility allocated for someone to manage the solution, and for someone to ensure that all the players within the solution, all the service providers, component providers, software vendors, and whoever else are providing compliant P2PE components, applications, and whatever devices to the solution need to remain compliant. So do not neglect the management of P2PE solutions. That will help ensure not just that the solution operates effectively, but also that you prepare for headwinds and risks that are coming down the road, like quantum computing and AI and other factors that might impact your cryptographic infrastructure and require you to change things as well in your cryptographic infrastructure.
Thank you, Paolo, for that final point, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Tal. It's great to be on, and looking forward to the next one.
Sounds great. I am as well. The P2PE program brings security and scope reduction benefits, but it's also a complex standard that relies on other PCI programs and requires clear ownership to manage effectively. With cryptography continuing to evolve, now is the time for organizations to ensure that they understand the components of P2PE and plan for the future of secure payments. If you enjoyed this fireside chat, be sure to check out our other videos or visit our website for more resources on payment security. Thank you again for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Foregenix Fireside Chats.